The neuron carries electrical impulses throughout the body and the brain. The main part of the neuron is the soma, or the cell body, which contains a nucleus and the major organelles. The cell body extends into structures called the dendrites that look like branches coming from the cell. The dendrites receive neurotransmitters from other cells and carry them towards the cell body. On the other side of the cell is the axon, which can be 3 feet long or very short. The axon transmits electrical signals to other neurons or over a considerable distance. If the axon is long, it contains a myelin sheath, which is a series of fatty cells called Schwann cells that are wrapped around the axon that serve as protection for the axon. At the end of the axon is the axon ending, aka the synaptic knob or the axon foot. It is here where the electrical message is translated into the desired neurotransmitter and sent to the next neuron. The transport of ions across the membrane of the neuron causes the electrical impulse that is transmitted throughout the nervous system. The series of steps in which this occurs is called action potential, which is also shown in the graph. Action potential begins at the resting state, which means the activation gates on the protein channels in the membrane are closed and potassium is inside the cell while sodium is outside the cell. Depolarization occurs when a stimulus, such as a neurotransmitter, opens the activation gates on some sodium channels, which depolarizes the membrane. The rising phase occurs when the depolarization reaches threshold. The activation gates on most sodium channels are now open, and the inside membrane of the neuron becomes positive due to the influx of sodium inside the cell. The falling phase of action potential occurs when the sodium channels close, the potassium channels open, and potassium efflux causes the inside to become negative again. Finally, the undershoot occurs when both gates close and the sodium gate reopens to allow balance to be restored. This stage is known as a sodium-potassium pump.
The central and peripheral are the main divisions of the nervous system. Most notably, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. I will be going into further detail on the brain later on in the lesson. The peripheral nervous system contains the nerves of the body, including 12 cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. There are 2 main subcategories of the peripheral nervous system: the autonomic and the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system controls the visceral functions of the body, which are activities done subconsciously. The autonomic nervous system can further be divided into the parasympathetic nervous system, which acts when the body is in rest and digesting, and the sympathetic nervous system, which comes into play in threatening situations, calling for fight or flight reactions. On the other hand, the somatic nervous system controls voluntary body movements involving skeletal muscle and reflexes. Overall, these divisions of the nervous system are crucial in working together to successfully communicate and perform daily activities. The brain is a highly specialized organ that coordinates and controls all activities of the body. The brain is divided into 3 main sections: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Being the largest part of the brain, the cerebrum is further divided into the following 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. The frontal lobe is responsible for reasoning, planning, speech, voluntary muscle movement, emotions, and problem solving. The parietal lobe is associated with receiving and interpreting nerve impulses from sensory receptors, movement, and orientation. The occipital lobe is primarily responsible for vision. And finally, perception and recognition of auditory stimuli, memory, and speech are regulated in the temporal lobe. Furthermore, the cerebellum deals with all skeletal muscle movement. Specifically, the cerebellum maintains balance and coordinates muscle movements for activities such as walking. The brain stem is made up of 3 parts: the pons, the midbrain, and the medulla oblongata. The pons conduct nerve impulses among the cerebrum, cerebellum, and other areas of the nervous system, houses 4 cranial nerves, and controls respiration. The midbrain contains the reflex center for vision and hearing. Furthermore, the medulla oblongata serves as a passageway for nerve impulses between the brain and spinal cord. Functions such as heart rate, rate and depth of respiration, blood pressure, and swallowing are facilitated here.